What's going on, everyone? This weekend is UFC Fight Night Mexico, headlined by Mexico's very own Brandon Moreno and the always exciting Steve Erceg. In this video, I'll be breaking down and predicting every fight on the card. Now let's instantly jump right on into it. With the first fight on the card, we have the 9-1 Markel Maderos taking on the UFC veteran Austin Hubbard. Not too much of a high-level fight, but a good one nonetheless. Maderos has only one fight in the UFC, which is a win against Landon Quiones. However, I reckon he's able to get it done in this one. I just don't see Hubbard as UFC level at this point, but I'd love to be proven wrong. Hopefully he's able to stay in the UFC. I don't like to see people get cut. I just don't think he has what it takes. Moving on. Jamal Emmers versus Gabriel Miranda. Miranda is a grappler with no striking and not really UFC level. I reckon Emmers is able to get the TKO in round 2 with not so much difficulty. Emmers has been really tested outside the UFC by some big names, and I think he should come out. Rafa Garcia versus Vince Pinchot. Now, Garcia is coming off a pretty bad TKO loss to Grant Dawson, in which his grappling didn't look very good, but he is a pretty decent grappler himself, very well balanced. And Vince Pinchot is just another UFC veteran. I think he's like 42 years old, one of the oldest person in the UFC, if not the oldest. I just saw a picture with him and Raul Rosas together. Pretty cool that they're together because Raul Rosas is the youngest in the UFC. That's very fun. Now, Rafa Garcia is fighting out of Mexicali, Baja California. I'm just on the other side of the fence as him in the U.S., so I hope he gets this one done. Now, Vince Pinchot is 2 losses in a row, so I really don't see him being able to get this one done. He's very old, like I said. I think he's able to beat low-level guys in the UFC, like someone we just saw, Austin Hubbard, who he has a win over. But I just don't think he's at the same level as Rafa Garcia currently in his career. Maybe back in the day he would have been, but I just don't see it anymore. So for this one, I'm going to have to go with Rafa Garcia to get it done. And I'm probably going to go with a decision. Seems likely. Now we're going on to the women's MMA fight of the card, which is Lupi Godinez versus Julia Pilastri. I think Lupita Godinez is going to get this job done. I think this is a layup for her. She's a very fun fighter because she's someone who's very active in women MMA, which maybe you don't get a lot. Even in men's MMA, you don't get that a lot. So she's very cool. She's lost 2 in a row, but those are to some of the top of the division. I think that, like I said, this is a layup for her, and I reckon she gets this one done fairly easy. And with that, she's going to probably want another step up in competition. I can see that happening for her. I think it's just an easy win for her. Moving on. Moving on to a fight on the card that I'm actually really interested in. Melquizael Costa versus Christian, the prospect killer Rodriguez. A lot of people are going for Melky on this one. I just don't see it happening. Christian Rodriguez is a really good fighter. He doesn't really get shown a lot because he's not fighting the top of the sport. Like I said, he's the prospect killer. He's fighting prospects only. I really like him. I like that fight against Raul Rosas. I think he really can get the job done in this one. Like I said, I think it's going to go to do a decision. I don't see Melky finishing him. And I can see him gassing out. Christian Rodriguez's cardio is insane. We've seen it before. We've seen him test these prospects, and no one comes out on top. I think he deserves a step up instead of just these constant prospects. And I think with this fight, he's going to be able to get it. So, Christian C-Rod Rodriguez, the prospect killer, getting it done. I reckon decision. Pretty easy. Not easy. Very tough fight for him. But I reckon he gets it done. Now we're moving on to another fight that I think is going to be a pretty controversial one for me. Jose Daniel Medina versus Arturo Gutierrez. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Hopefully I got that one right. With this one, Daniel Medina is just someone who's very, very tough. Extremely tough chin. Like, we've seen him get cracked hundreds of shots to the face and doesn't drop. Kind of blobbish build. Very I don't know, like just a big Nate Diaz. Like, we could say a middleweight James Yantop, if you guys know James Yantop, who was recently fought Mauricio Hufi at 155. So this is like a middleweight James Yantop. Very tough, can take the beating, and he's going against middleweight Francis Ngannou pretty much. 6'4", pretty good size reach, tons of muscle on this build. Look at him. You can see it in the picture. He's a pretty tough guy. But the reason I say that is it's going to be a very controversial one. Not a single soul is picking Jose Medina. But I think this is going to be like a UFC 5 type situation. I think Otebe Gautier is going to gas out. I think he's going to throw a lot in the first round, which is why I say UFC 5 situation. We all know, we've all been there. We get a little excited playing on a normal or easy mode, just go all crazy throwing punches. You get tired. And I think he's going to get tired. I think Jose Medina is going to come through. He's not crafty. He's not very creative, but he's tough. And I reckon he's going to be able to out cardio him in this fight. I would hope he could out cardio him in this fight, because if he doesn't have cardio, then what else does this guy have? He's fighting out of Bolivia. I don't know the elevation in there, but I think he's going to be able to get it done. I think Otebe Gautier is going to get a little bit of a fraud check just because he doesn't go out swinging. He really is going to go out swinging. And a guy like Medina, you can't go out swinging against him. So there we have it. I got Jose Medina getting this one done. Very hard. Probably a tough decision. I could very much see this going the other way, and my comments being this age like milk. But please, guys, I am not bedtime MMA. Don't come at me like that. I don't want that to start up on the channel. Maybe it's a bad take. I think he gets it done by a decision. Could be wrong. Moving on to probably another very, very fun fight on the card. I reckon this is probably the funner flyweight fight on the card besides the main event. So we got Edgar Chairez, Puro Chicali versus CJ Vergara. CJ Vergara is another tough out. Like, he's been knocked out too many times. I don't know if he's able to get this one done. Edgar Chairez has been thrown in there with some of the best. He's fought Joshua Van in that Sphere card. That was a very fun fight. If you guys haven't checked that one out, go look at that. Very exciting fight. I'm sure you'll love it. He has a win over Daniel Cerda. He's fought Tatsuro Taira, which is not too bad of a loss. He took him to decision. He is a good grappler. He's very long and very big for the division. CJ Vergara is very big too, I guess. He has a lot of muscle and blob on him, but he's not the same size. He doesn't have the reach. I think he's going to get outpointed from a distance. I reckon we can get maybe a TKO. I don't know if he's going to be able to get the submission on him. I don't think he's the same level of grappler to get a submission win like this, but I think he could get the TKO, and I hope he does. He's another fighter fighting out of Mexicali. Like I said, I'm just on the other side of the border. I hope he gets it done. Really exciting fighter. Really fun. Kind of like, go check him out. Go check this fight out. I'm sure it's going to be fireworks, and I'm sure you guys will enjoy it. All right, so moving on to the next fight on the card. It's someone who's very big in Mexico. I don't know why. He has 2 million followers on Instagram, which is pretty crazy to me. He's not really big in the U.S., I guess, or elsewhere. Maybe I'm wrong on this. But yeah, he seems to be a pretty big star. Like, I go to my suegro's house in Mexicali, and I see that he's been on the TV a couple times, like on talk shows and stuff like that. So he's a pretty big star. And he came off that fight recently with Ode Osborne, which could have gone either direction. If you have it going to Osborne or not, I wouldn't be too mad at you. He was able to drop him and put him in a crazy submission attempt in the first round. But Rodriguez showed his toughness and his grit in that fight, and he was able to come back and at least win the last 2 rounds, if not one of those rounds. So I think he was able to get it done in that fight. Very close. Could go either way, like I said. And with this one, he's facing someone in Kevin Bojas, who just really isn't that great of a fighter. He's pretty decent. He has a win over Victor Diaz in the Contender Series. And then since then, he's fought Joshua Van and lost decision. And he fought the powerful Alessandro Costa, and he lost that fight in round 2. I don't know if Borjas is able to get this one done. Like I said, Rodriguez is a pretty good grappler. I don't know about Borjas' grappling. I know he's pretty tough on the feet. He's someone who's like to throw a lot. He got outpointed by Joshua Van. I don't know how great of a striker he is. Could be a tough fight for Rodriguez, but I do see Rodriguez getting this one done. I don't know if it's going to be submission or finish or TKO. I don't know. Probably going to be a decision. And if it's a finish, maybe he gets like a weird submission. Probably like a guillotine. I don't think he gets a triangle. He's got pretty short legs, but maybe a ground and pound stoppage. His control from the full mount was pretty crazy. We saw that against Ode Osborne. He had a full triangle, a body triangle in on that, and he was able to maneuver around the mount from back to front pretty easily in that triangle, which was very impressive. Next up on the card, we have David Martinez versus Simon Oliveira. We got 2 fighters coming from the Contender Series. One of them with 2 fights currently in the UFC, and those are 2 losses with Simon Oliveira, being that of Simon Oliveira. And David Martinez, who is looking to have his first fight in the UFC, coming off a win, a decision in the Contender Series, which isn't the best because we know they aren't UFC level, but he does look very exciting, and there's a reason he did get that contract. He's got good boxing, and the kid's a surgeon. He's a surgeon outside of the UFC. This is his second job, or I don't know if the surgeon's his second job. Either way, those are two of the craziest professions to have on your resume. Like, that's insane. I reckon with this one, I don't know. I'm not going to get into too much detail on this fight. They're both coming off the Contender Series. I think Martinez looks a little bit more exciting, and I'm going to give him the win. With that, I would say maybe a TKO or a decision. Definitely not a submission. I would say third round TKO or a tough decision. I don't know about Simon Oliveira being able to get this one done. Like I said, he's coming off 2 losses in the UFC, which isn't that that great of a look to be coming off of. One of those being Daniel Marcos, who is a pretty decent fighter himself. Like I said, 2 losses in a row, only win out of his last 3 being on the Contender Series, which, like I said, is not UFC level. I'm going to have to go with David Martinez on this one, getting it done. Not too easy, not too hard. A good fight for him. Moving on. Next up on the card, we got 2 exciting bantamweights going at it with Raul Rosas Jr. and Vince Morales. Now, these are 2 fighters who are kind of 2 different points in their career. We got Raul Rosas, who has come in into the UFC, being one of the youngest fighters in UFC history. And with that, he's coming off a pretty good fight streak right now. He's on a 3-fight win streak with one of them being RG Lang, Ricky Tercios, and Terrence Mitchell. He lost to Christian Rodriguez, who is another fighter that's on this card who I rate pretty good. Vince Morales is coming off a loss to Elijah Smith and Taylor Lapulus, who are very good prospects at bantamweight. Prior to that, he was not in the UFC, in which he was in a 5-fight win streak. Prior to that 5-fight win streak, he was in the UFC with a loss to Miles Johns, Jonathan Martinez, and then 2 wins in the UFC, a loss to Chris Gutierrez, a loss to Benito Lopez, a win over Eamon Zahabi, who will be fighting Jose Aldo next, a loss to Son Yadong to finish it off in the UFC. Now, this is another one that I might get a lot of controversy over because of who I'm picking. I really don't see Raul Rosas Jr. getting it done in this fight. Vince Morales is very, very tough. We've seen that before. We've seen he's a decent grappler. He's able to hold his own against someone like Elijah Smith, who is not the same level of grappler as Raul Rosas is. But we've seen Raul Rosas struggle before in the cardio department, and we know how tough Vince Morales is. He's shown it before. He's kind of becoming a veteran now in the UFC. He has to be with all the fights he's had. He's still pretty young, but I could see Raul Rosas Jr. gassing out in this fight like he did against C-Rod. I could be very wrong. Another age like milk comment could be coming in the comments. I just don't see him getting it done in this fight. I think he's going to gas out, and if he wins, hey, it's going to be a close decision. I don't see him finishing this fight the same as Elijah Smith, Taylor Lapulus. Let's see, who else? Jonathan Martinez, Miles Johns, Song Yadong. All these fighters did not finish him when he was in the UFC. But maybe he's able to get it done. Raul Rosas, that being, he is a good prospect at 135, very young, has a future in the sport, most definitely. I just don't know if he's able to get it done in this fight, realistically speaking, from my end. That's what I've seen. I think Vince Morales is pretty good of a fighter. That's my take. Moving on. Next fight on the card, we have Kevin Gastelum versus Joe Pyfer. Another fun one. Could be very exciting both ways. Kevin Gastelum is a very tough fighter. This one's going to be at middleweight. We've seen him before at middleweight and at welterweight. I think he looks better at welterweight. However, at middleweight, maybe just has a couple more strength points to that chin, in which he's going to need fighting someone like Joe Pyfer, who has tons of power in that hand. You've seen Joe Pyfer fight before. He's a first-round type of guy. He knocks everyone out. He did lose recently to Jack Hermanson, but Jack Hermanson is, crafty as it gets. That's Jack Hermanson, man. He's very good. I don't think Kevin Gastelum is that same level of fighter. He may be a lot tougher, and he could punch a lot harder. I just don't think he's that same level. Kevin Gastelum, he is someone who's missed weight prior. That's why he's no longer fighting at welterweight. I'm guessing that's the reason why. He's a Mexican fighter, so he's going to have that chin to him. I just don't know about this fight. Another one that's very hard to predict. I could see it playing out the same way that I think the Jose Medina fight will play out, with Kevin Gastelum eating a lot of shots earlier on, Joe Pyfer gassing out toward the later rounds. However, I think Joe Pyfer is not Atabeg Gourtier, however his name is. I think it's a little bit better, and I don't think Kevin Gastelum is Jose Medina though. I think he's better than Medina, that's for sure. I mean, yeah, but I just don't think he's fighting someone like Ataba Gautier where he's gonna be able to, get the win. I reckon this fight goes to decision, and with that decision, I'm gonna have to give that to Joe Pyfer. But I could also see it going the other way if it does go to decision. That being in Mexico, I doubt it. Kevin Gastelum's not a big name anymore. They're not gonna try to make a name off him with him, but I could see this one going to Joe Pyfer decision. He's not gonna knock out Gastelum. The reason I said it's like the Medina fight is because Gastelum is just gonna take a lot of punches early on. He's gonna have more success in the later rounds, but I just don't think he's gonna be able to do what he needs to do in this fight. I think Joe Pyfer is gonna be able to outcraft him in this fight towards the later rounds when he needs to be. Unlike someone like Otaba Gautier, who I don't think has that ability, who's someone who's just all power, all athleticism. Joe Pyfer is all power, all athleticism. However, he does have some technique in there, and he does have good grappling ability nonetheless, too, of that. So, with this one, I'm going to go with Joe Pyfer. I think it's going to be a fun fight. Check this one out. Moving on. Now, for the co-main event, Manuel Aloco Torres versus Drew Dober. This is a banger of a fight. We got Drew Dober with the strongest chin in the UFC, perhaps. Could be. Has a couple TKOs on his record. But, I mean, look at the guy. He's the Crimson Chin. And we got Manuel El Loco Torres, who's going to be coming out there swinging nothing but hooks. And maybe I'm all over the place with my logic in this fight, because I do think he's going to be able to knock out Dober. It's just Dober doesn't have that same chin anymore. I'm thinking if someone is taking that much damage like Drew Dober has, facing absolute killers like he has, he's coming off a loss to John Silva, Renato Moicano. He has a loss to Matt Frivola. He's took some damage to Bobby Green in that fight. That was the best. That Terrence McKinney fight was insane. A lot of damage. He has a win in those 3 fights, like with Rafael Alves también. But someone like Alves in that fight, he looked good, but Alves had a lot of success, and he's no longer even in the UFC. So I do think Manuel Torres is going to be able to get this one done. He is 5'10". He has a 73-inch reach. Drew Dober is 5'8" with the 70-inch reach. He is longer, and I think he's going to be able to connect on his shots, and his hooks are going to connect, in which he wasn't able to do against Bahamondes. We saw him just running forward, chin up in the air, which isn't the best look. I think he's going to learn from that. I think he's still going to go forward and throw his hooks like he needs to, but I think he's going to be a little bit more measured. Now, looking back at his Tapology record, he's coming off a loss to Bahamondes, like I said. He has a win against Chris Duncan, which is a rear naked choke. So he out-grappled Chris Duncan, which is insane. Chris Duncan just fraud checked Jordan Vucenic at UFC London, and that looked good. Chris Duncan's a good grappler, so this aged pretty well. He has that elbow against Nicolas Mata, which was pretty insane. That was brutal as it gets. So this dude's a good fighter in the UFC, very brutal. I think he has good finishing instincts. But if you put him against someone like Ignacio Bahamondes, who is, very long, very rangy, who's going to be able to find his shots well, I think that's a bad matchup for him. That's why he got knocked out in that fight. However, he didn't look that good. But I do think he's able to get this one done. I just don't think Drew Dober has the same chin as he has had in the past. Not saying it's not a bad chin. I'm sure his chin is still better than most. He's not no Dominic Reyes or whatever. He's still Drew Dober. He still has a crazy chin. I just think he's going to get TKO'd in this fight. And in Mexico, with someone like Manuel Torres, who's going to have the fanfare, I think if, you get dropped in this fight and he goes in with some ground and pound shots, I think the ref might stop it. Hopefully he doesn't. Drew Dober is very tough, and I love to see him continue fighting. With that, I got Manuel Torres. Now, the reason everybody clicked on this video, we got Mexico's own Brandon Moreno versus Australia's Steve Erceg in the main event. 5 rounds. We got Steve Erceg coming off a bad knockout to Kai Kara France and a loss to Alexandre Pantoja, in which he faced the champion and gave the champion probably one of his toughest fights in the UFC, in which he didn't out-scramble, but scrambled well with the champion, and he was able to leave a permanent scar. I think that's a permanent scar. It was a pretty brutal cut that he left with an elbow. He looked really good that fight. His last fight, he did not look really good. I guess he looked good before he got knocked out, but he got knocked out, so that's not good. Brandon Moreno is coming off a win to Amir Albazi, in which he looked like vintage Brandon Moreno. Looked insane in that fight. He looked really good. Now, prior to that, he has lost to Brandon Royval and a loss to the champion, which isn't the best, but those two are the top of the sport, and Erceg would lose to both of those fighters, in which he already lost to one of them. I think Erceg would beat Amir Albazi. Another thing to note, this is Brandon Moreno's home, Mexico. He has lost. I don't think he's ever won in Mexico City, so there's that. But Erceg was supposed to be fighting Asu Amabayev, who is a heavy grappler in that fight, so I think maybe his takedown defense is going to be very good. But I don't think Brandon Moreno is going to be looking to take down Steve Erceg, who has very good scrambling capability himself. I think Moreno has the better boxing in this fight. People would like to think that Erceg is one of the best boxers in the division. However, that hasn't stood the test of time, and I think Brandon Moreno is going to be able to outbox him in this fight through 5. I think he's going to have the cardio advantage. Erceg is taking this fight on short notice, like I said. Um, I really don't see this fight just going to Erceg at all whatsoever. I think Brandon Moreno is going to be able to get it done. He's going to keep it going. Your time has come, Steve Erceg. There you go. Brandon Moreno in the main event. I think he's going to get this one done by decision. You can count me on that one. I don't think Erceg has what it takes to go against someone like Brandon Moreno. I think he's going to have the same level of success that he had with someone like maybe Pantoja. But I think Brandon Moreno is going to get the nod in this one. It's going to be a very, very close decision. It's going to be a war. I can see them getting very hurt, but I think Erceg is going to be wearing most of the damage. With that, we've come to the end of my video. Thank you guys so much. This is my 3rd video. I hope you guys enjoyed my predictions and my breakdown of UFC Fight Night Mexico. Now, this one is very, very late like the other one, so hopefully that doesn't become a trend on the channel. I'm really hoping it doesn't. But with that, hopefully that you guys have some patience with me. Like I said, this is only the 3rd video that I've ever made, and they're only going to keep getting better. I have a video already built and ready to go, UFC 314 prediction video. And with that, I'm hoping to gain a lot of fans because I put a lot of work into that presentation itself. And I think the visuals are going to look really good for the video. Hopefully I don't kill it with the poor audio like I've been doing these past couple videos. I'm not the best person on the mic, but I am trying to get better. Thank you guys, everyone. Hope you guys enjoyed. Later.